mind. Our mission statement at KBLA Talk 1580 is simple: to create an inclusive platform that promotes civil discourse through honest dialogue and encourages personal growth among our listeners so they can become the active agents of change. Our vision is to establish ourselves as the premier radio network with relevant programming across the beloved community, connecting people through shared experiences and collective power for lasting impact beyond these challenging times.
I'm Tavis Smiley, glad to have you in with us today in this second hour of our program. Great conversation in the first hour, two great conversations, talking some politics with Danielle Moody, and spent some time talking about AI and its impact on the finance sector with Everett Sands, the CEO of Lindustry. In our third and final hour today, Cedric the Entertainer's got a new book out. He's the first of the Kings of Comedy to put out a novel, and so Cedric joins us live in our third hour today. But in this hour, in fact, on this day, September 18th, 1895, Booker T. Washington delivered his powerful and renowned Atlanta Compromise speech, often referred to as the Atlanta Exposition speech, during the opening of the Cotton States and International Exposition in Atlanta, Georgia. He was serving, of course, as the founding president of what we now know as Tuskegee College. Washington achieved the historic milestone of being the first African-American man to address a racially diverse Southern audience. In his address, he imparted a message of hope, urging those of his race to focus on improving their conditions in their current surroundings and fostering amicable relationships with the Southern white community. His philosophy emphasized, as you know, self-help, political gradualism, and accommodation as a means to address racial tensions, resonating at the time with both white and black Americans who were fatigued by the violence and turmoil of the Reconstruction era in the South. Dr. Sarah Washington O'Neal Rush is the great-granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, and as you might imagine, she draws profound inspiration from her great-grandfather's enduring legacy, and I'm pleased to have her on the program to talk not just about his work, but indeed her work specifically as it relates to character education, and a new workbook curriculum that she has authored called 16 Success Principles: Being, Growing, Leading, Soaring. Dr. Washington O'Neal Rush, good to have you on this program. How are you today?
Hello, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm doing well.
Wonderful. Glad to have you on, and glad we have an hour to sort of talk about these things. Let me start with this. Obviously, Booker T. Washington, as I mentioned, is your great grandfather. And right. I wonder, in retrospect, how you process all of the conversation still about Washington and Du Bois and the critique of Washington, specifically for his notions of, as I said earlier, political gradualism and accommodation. These debates are as spirited now as they have been for decades about Booker T. Washington's philosophy. When you hear people engaged in those conversations in the media, or when you find yourself in these conversations, how do you read the critique of your great-grandfather all these years later?
Okay. Well, first of all, that's a great question, and I would say probably 90% of what I hear, and I've just been really following this for the last 30 years, and I can talk a little bit more about that, how I came upon knowing more about my great-grandfather only as an adult.
Sure.
But in the last 30 years, I've known, and so in that time, probably 90% is positive, and then there's that 10% that can be negative, and it's not only because he's my great-grandfather, but I think because I believe in what he did, it can be really disheartening, and I find most of the time it's from people that may be a little bit uninformed, and so even Du Bois, if you look at the critiques of him from Du Bois, in Souls of Black Folk, and he still pays him great homage. And you know, in between or at the end of that chapter on Booker T. Washington, where he criticizes him being quiet. He wanted him to speak up a little more. They used to at one time. They were on the same page, and even after the Atlanta, I didn't pick up on the exposition speech being on September the 18th. So thank you for that. But he, after that speech, Du Bois wrote a letter, and all of this is documented, and a short letter to Washington, because again, they were friends, and he congratulated him and said that it was a phenomenal success, and that it was a word fitly spoken. But as things didn't happen the way both of them thought they would in the time that it should have happened, Du Bois was growing more and more frustrated, and they did eventually part. But I don't know if you'll allow me, there's a quote in the Souls of Black Folk when he's criticizing Washington. He also says, so far as Mr. Washington preaches thrift, patience, and industrial training for the masses, we must hold up his hands and strive with him, rejoicing in his honors and glorifying in his strength of this Joshua called of God and of man to lead the headless host, which was the masses. And he referred to him as being sincere and earnest, and they both knew that most of the controversy came from their followers more than the two of them. I think they had great respect, but they disagreed as time went on. And I think we do a disservice as we continually pit one against the other, even more than they pitted. You know, we weren't there, but the Netflix film, Madam C.J. Walker film, where Booker T. Washington was grossly mischaracterized as a misogynist, and it had to do with her wanting to speak at the National Negro Conference. And he refused at first, and she was persistent. And when he heard her, he was so impressed that he invited her back the next year to be a speaker, and they became friends and business associates. And when they dedicated a school MCA in Indianapolis, and he did the dedication speech. She had a car pick him up. She invited him to stay in her home, which he did. But they don't say all of that. So they leave us pitted and divided. And I think we do a disservice to ourselves. No, I know that was a mouthful. No,
it's a mouthful, but I take your point. Let me do this. When we come forward, there are a couple of questions I want to ask right quick about political gradualism and accommodation. I sometimes wonder whether or not Booker T. Washington gets a bad rap, given how we see political gradualism and accommodation in real time versus what he was up against in that time. I want to sort of probe that, number one. Number two, I certainly want to get more into your backstory about how you learned about your great-grandfather and your connection to him only as an adult. I want to hear that story. And, of course, we'll work our way through this hour and talk about your 16 success principles, being, growing, leading, and soaring. It's going to be a great hour just getting started with the great-granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, Dr. Sarah Washington O'Neal Rush, who you're listening to right now on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Escalade IQ. This the intro to the all-electric Cadillac, perfection like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop. Haiku. This is what I do. Daddy fat intellect since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Come with 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shawty don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit. You me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Dilly, beloved, clearly we're hustling. Bustin', truckin'. Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com.
Available late 2024. GM estimate 450-mile range. On a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection. Consistent with the CHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambiance temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
In Big Tobacco's Fantasyland, children are the future. Here, tobacco companies are committed to higher education, offering scholarships to students who submit essays about the benefits of vaping. The tobacco industry even sponsors summer camps for kids. Don't worry, the tobacco-sponsored programs have been linked to leaving your kids more interested in smoking. In Big Tobacco's Fantasyland, the world's deadliest industry is your child's friend.
See reality at undo.org.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like Sprinklers in the Rain and Leaky Faucets. They're tunes from another time because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on. K-Drip.
Hi, this is LA City Councilman Curran Price, inviting you to the 28th Annual Central Avenue Jazz Fest on September the 23rd from 11 to 7 p.m. For nearly 3 decades, the Central Avenue Jazz Festival has paid homage to the legendary Central Avenue and its influence on jazz history. Jazz, blues, and Latin jazz will be featured on 3 stages of music. Co-headlining are Hubert Laws with special guest Eloise Laws and the Billy Childs Quartet featuring Sean Jones. The day includes plenty of food, merchants, and 4 pavilions focused on youth programming, art, health and wellness, and public resources. Parking is limited, so Metro and rideshare are recommended. Hubert Laws with special guests Eloise Laws and the Billy Childs Quartet featuring Sean Jones. The day includes plenty of food, merchants, and 4 pavilions focused on youth programming, art, health and wellness, and public resources. For more information, visit CentralAveJazzFest.com. CentralAveJazzFest.com. See you on the 23rd.
Sounds different, huh? This is Tavis Smiley.
Just getting started in this hour with Dr. Sarah Washington O'Neill Rush, who is the great-granddaughter of Booker T. Washington. Why is she on today? Because on this date, September 18th, 1895, Booker T. Washington delivered his renowned Atlanta Compromise speech, often referred to once again as the Atlanta Exposition speech. And I wanted to spend some time sort of unpacking that and catching up with his great-granddaughter and how she's extending his legacy in her own work, specifically in the area of character education, about which I have some questions when we get to that later in this hour. For now, though, as I said a moment ago, I wanted to spend some more time probing this notion advanced by Booker T. Washington in this speech on this day in 1895, where he talks about political gradualism, emphasizes and, in fact, encourages, the notion of political gradualism and accommodation as a means to address racial tensions. Let me give you a quote from this speech. To those of my race who depend on bettering their condition in a foreign land, or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the Southern white man, I would say, cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down in making friends in every manly way of the people of all races by whom we are surrounded. Close quote. That's Booker T. Washington on this date in 1895, encouraging black folk to make friends in every manly way of the people of all races by whom we are surrounded. Here you get this notion of accommodation, this notion of political gradualism. I raise this, Dr. Rush, because I wonder oftentimes whether or not when we look at Booker T. Washington through a real-time lens, we would not abide that in this moment. We would not abide that notion of political gradualism. Dr. King, of course, comes years after Booker T. Washington and writes a book called Why We Can't Wait. Dr. King comes years after Booker T. Washington and says that change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. So King pushes back against this notion years later of political gradualism. And then, of course, there's the notion of accommodation. I heard you say earlier that mostly when people talk to you about your grandfather, your great-grandfather, rather you hear positive things, and I'm glad to hear that. But there is this 10% that you mentioned that raise these issues and have a serious critique of your great-grandfather. So in that regard, on the notions of political gradualism, accommodation, and the quote that I just shared, my question is simply this. I wonder whether or not you think that Booker T. Washington often gets judged perhaps too harshly given where we are today as relatively free black folk in America and the conditions he found himself in then. Does that make sense as a question?
I think so, and I guess you can tell me if I'm answering you the right way. I heard a lot in there, and the way my mind races, so I think about this, that,
Sure.
and so I may get off track, and you can bring me back in.
We'll work through it. We'll work through it together. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And so for the cast down your buckets where you are, my immediate thought there was my son owns a barbershop in East Oakland, and he rents out an office to a friend, and his friend is an artist, and he works with youth in the community, and so he rented out the office. So the friend brings in a painting, not knowing that my son is the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington, and it was a painting of Booker T. Washington, and he's casting down, he has a bucket that's being cast down on the painting, and he said what that quote meant to him was to do the, and this is what I hear often, is to do the work where you are, to serve where you are, and that's exactly what he does. And he said that was the most inspiring quote, actually, that he got out of the exposition speech. As far as then and now, we are in definitely different times, and again, my first time at Tuskegee University was as an adult, and I remember listening to well, no, I won't go there, but it was as an adult, and so when I think about how Booker T. Washington, born a slave, and at that time it was illegal for blacks to learn to read or write, and they could, it was a crime, and it was a crime punishable by death. So that's something that he always wanted, and he went through a lot more than we have time to talk about in order to get an education, and he believed that that was the way up. So he was going to do whatever, and so, you know, I'm amazed at what he and other ancestors, and I'm inspired by what they were able to do then with much worse conditions when it was okay to lynch and different things. And I think, and I know that's why Booker T. Washington was quiet back then, because all he was concerned about was Tuskegee, but not only Tuskegee, he was instrumental in the Rosenwald schools for education, and they built over 5,000 schools that I believe they educated over a third of the South during those times. Well, he died before they were all built. He partnered with Julius Rosenwald, who was the president of Sears and Roebuck, and those schools, they educated people like Maya Angelou, Congressman John Lewis, the you know, different people, and so, and then the Laurinburg Institute, which is in North Carolina, where I am now, he was instrumental in getting that school open. And so all he was about was education, and not just education. When they came, they thought they were going to get out of working, because, you know, after so many years, hundreds of years of slavery, they thought, we're getting educated. And he had other ideas. He said, oh, no, we're going to work hard. We're going to build our buildings. There were no buildings. We're going to grow our food, and we are going to change our lives. And there's a book called Christian Business Legends that says by, I believe it was 1901, Tuskegee had produced more self-made millionaires than Harvard, Princeton, and Yale combined. And it's because of trades or different. A.G. Gaston was someone who was influenced by Booker T. Washington and named he was a black millionaire who named many of his companies after Booker T. Washington, the burial insurance company, the insurance company, the business school. And so a lot came out of what he was doing then. I don't think he would think right now that we should still be there, and we are not still where we were then. And I think we've made a lot of strides with black president, black vice president, and different, you know, from where we are now. I don't know if I'm answering that.
No, you are. The point I was pressing toward, and you've addressed a lot, and I'm glad you said everything you've offered. What I was pressing toward was whether or not we think that Booker T. Washington gets judged too harshly, looking at him through a real-time lens. His notions of political gradualism, his notions of accommodation are things that we wouldn't abide today. Again, I reference King in his book, Why We Can't Wait. And so those notions wouldn't work today. I think you said something earlier, though, that resonates with me. Whether one agrees or disagrees with Booker T. Washington's notion of gradualism politically and accommodation then as a means to address racial tensions, one thing is certain. Both he and Du Bois didn't realize it was going to take as long as it took. And by that, I mean, here we are in 2023, and we are still not where we ought to be in this country. I digress on that point. So both of them were sort of bamboozled, if we can put it that way, by how long it took. In fact, as you well know, you sort of intimated this earlier, Du Bois eventually just left the country. At least your great-grandfather never left. Du Bois just gave up and said, I'm out of here. This is not working. It's taking too long. And he moves to Accra, Ghana. And that's where Du Bois spends his remaining years, dies, of course, in Accra, Ghana. Right. And for those of you history buffs, because of the time and the span, geographically, the span between Ghana and the United States, Du Bois had died in Ghana, and the news of his death came much later, but it arrived literally during the March on Washington. As you know, just a few days ago, we celebrated the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, 60 years later. It was during that march that the country and black people writ large heard the news announced at the March on Washington that Dr. Du Bois had died in Accra, Ghana. Now, if that ain't something that gives you goosebumps, I don't know what will. That this movement that's in part possible because of all the great work that Du Bois had done as the first black person to get a PhD from Harvard, and all that Dr. Du Bois had done with the Crisis magazine and all his great books, for the news to come literally during the March on Washington, announced from the podium by A. Philip Randolph, that Du Bois had passed away in Ghana is always a moment for me. For those who didn't know the story, now you know it. You can share it with others. But I love reminding people of that interesting note in history, connecting Du Bois to the March on Washington. I'll leave that where it is. But my point is that Du Bois had enough of it, and he ultimately just left. So for both Booker T. Washington, your great-grandfather, and Du Bois, the change was too long in coming, so we'll leave that where it is. Let me pivot now, if I can, before I move into your work in character education in the spirit of your great-grandfather. Tell me what you meant when you suggested earlier that you didn't really come into the full knowledge of your relationship to Booker T until your adult years, Dr. Rush.
Sure. When people learn that I'm the great-granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, generally the first impression or assumption is that I grew up in some type of royal upbringing, but it was quite the contrary. Much of what led to what I speak and write about today was born out of my personal experience of overcoming tremendous odds. I growing up without my dad and my mother, my mom was the granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, and at times she was working 2 jobs just to make ends meet and keep a roof over our head. By the time I was 16, I was a single teenage mother. I was living on my own by 17 in public housing in deep East Oakland while raising my son alone and on welfare and trying to finish high school. And I was in and out at the time of an emotionally and sometimes physically abusive relationship with my son's dad, who was a drug dealer, and frankly, he was his own best customer. He finally left for good when my son was 2, and the next time we'd see him again was at 17. So as you can imagine, a lot went on before, after, and in between all of that journey and the journey of my rising above my circumstances. But in the interest of time, I'll just share that the main drivers that got me to where I am or got me away from where I was in this order was counseling, a relationship with Christ, and learning the depths of my family history during a visit to Tuskegee University for the first time. And all of this happened in my 30s. Until then, I was pretty much lost and confused and looking for myself in all the wrong places. And so the way I got to Tuskegee as an adult, my mom was born and raised across the street from the university, and some would say that she lived a life of royalty, she and her 3 sisters, because she was the firstborn, and she was born 4 years after he died. Mm-hmm. She was born in 1919, and now she's buried there on the cemetery lawn where he and George Washington Carver and others, her parents and other prominent people, are buried. But she didn't talk about it. We moved to California or we didn't move to California. I was born in California during the 60s when the Black Panthers were probably a stone's throw away from where we lived. But my mom didn't talk about it much. And my dad, though, he bragged about it. But they weren't together. They had a very broken, tumultuous relationship. And he would brag about it, but he wouldn't tell us why he was bragging about it. So we would just get embarrassed. And it wasn't until one of my cousins, when I was in my 30s again, decided he wanted his daughter to know about the legacy. So we planned a family reunion, and when we got on the campus, there were people that were there. They wanted autographs, photographs. They just wanted to touch us, to talk to us. And my mom was alive at the time. It was in 96, and she died in 99. And I'm like, Mama, what is this? And so, you know, the thing that I was most fascinated by were there were buildings, and I believe they're still in use today. They were then, that were built by Booker T. Washington and his students, who were all former slaves. And they didn't only build and erect the buildings, but they made the bricks. And some people say he just wanted people to be slaves. Well, they had to learn mathematics, architecture. Robert Taylor, the first black architect that was enrolled in MIT, he was over the program to build so he brought in the biggest and the brightest minds to teach these students. Again, George Washington Carver. He even invited Du Bois before they split to work there, but they were beginning to part, and Du Bois declined. But at any rate, where was I going with it? So this is what turned my life around. You know, I came home, because before then, again, I was lost and confused and trying to figure it out and looking for things in all the wrong places. But then I was ignited, and I'm like, wow, you know, they were former slaves, and they were able to do all of this. And so I wanted to help youth learn about their ancestry and their genealogy, and to go back and to gain some strength. Let me cut keep moving. Yeah.
Let me cut in right there, because that's excuse me. Let me cut in right there, because that's where I want to pick up and continue the story when we come forward.
Okay.
Because I'm fascinated. I know the audience is, to hear the story of the great granddaughter of Booker T. Washington and all that you had to endure growing up in Oakland. It's quite the story. It's hard for people to imagine that somebody enduring that could be a part of that kind of royalty, as you put it. So, I want to probe that when we come forward. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Esther Dillard, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A report on the San Diego County taxpayer-funded immigration program is raising some concerns. The Immigration Rights Legal Defense Program provides legal assistance for immigrants at a cost of $5 million since May 2021. The Board of Supervisors was split on the report, with some saying that the county should be using taxpayer money to tackle the fentanyl and homelessness problem, Meantime, in New York City, Black Mayor Eric Adams continues to call on the federal government to do much more to help the city with the migrant crisis. The mayor spoke out again about the drastic budget cuts needed in order to make way for billions of dollars in spending on the migrant issue. And consumer sentiment is down slightly this month. The University of Michigan's early reading for September notes uncertainty over inflation and the economy. And that's the latest. I'm Esther Dillard from the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
A SIG alert has been issued in Fountain Valley as a stalled garbage truck remains in the right lane of the 405 north before Magnolia Street, while a 25-minute backup runs heavy from Highway 73. In Anaheim Hills on the 91 west before the 55 Costa Mesa Freeway interchange, watch for an accident on the right shoulder with heavy traffic from Ware Canyon Road, Yorba Linda Boulevard interchange. Also expect heavy traffic as you head through Angels Stadium as the Angels are versing the Tigers tonight at 6:38, adding to some heavy delays in this area.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like your style, though.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. Want to save big on custom faux wood blinds, shutters, cellular shades, and more? Shop Blindster today and save up to 50% over comparable blinds from brick and mortar stores. Get custom blinds at low prices and free shipping at Blindster.com.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like watering your lawn during the hottest time of the day and leaky faucets. They're tunes from another time because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on. K-Drip.
The Black Hollywood Education and Resource Center proudly presents its 25th annual Real Black Men Short Film Showcase, September 22nd through the 24th. Join us for the opening night celebration on Friday, September 22nd, featuring iconic film director Michael Schultz of Cooley High and Car Wash fame, along with rising director Jewel Taylor from They Clone Tyrone, plus actor-director Maurice J. Irvin. Then on Saturday, September 23rd and Sunday, September 24th, enjoy the short film showcase featuring 47 films by emerging black male directors from across the globe. Celebrate a legacy of brotherhood and excellence. All events will be held at the Regal LA Live Cinemas in downtown Los Angeles. For more information and tickets, visit www.bherc.org or call 323-957-4656. That's 323-957-4656. Support black cinema at the 25th annual Real Black Men Short Film Showcase. See you there.
You are now in Big Tobacco's Fantasyland. Welcome. It's a healthier world where they want you to believe that vaping makes quitting cigarettes a breeze. Never mind the evidence that vaping leads to using both. And if you're younger, even better, teens who vape are 3 times likelier to use cigarettes. In Big Tobacco's Fantasyland, the deadliest industry is your friend.
Big Tobacco's idea of smoke-free is a dangerous fantasy for us all. See reality at undo.org.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Indeed, our guest in this hour is Dr. Sarah Washington O'Neal Rush. In case you just tuned in, she is the great-granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, and we are having her on, have her on our program today in part because of her own work, which we'll get to in a moment here. But primarily because on September 18th, this date in 1895, her great-grandfather delivered his very renowned, his famous Atlanta Compromise speech, often referred to as the Atlanta Exposition speech. We've been sort of deconstructing that speech, some of what he had to say that day about his emphasis on self-help and political gradualism and accommodation as a means to address racial tensions in that particular era. She has a workbook and curriculum in her space of character education, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this hour, called 16 Success Principles: Being, Growing, Leading, Soaring. I raise the title of that book because that notion of 16 Success Principles, being, growing, leading, and soaring, comes courtesy of a life with some hardships in it. And I was struck, and of course I knew the story preparing for this conversation, but I was struck when I first learned of it, and I suspect many of you were when you first heard it moments ago, that the great-granddaughter of someone as well-known, royalty, in fact, Booker T. Washington, could have such a rough upbringing in Oakland. And I wonder if I can ask Dr. Rush how you process being a part of this grand legacy, a part of this family, and having nonetheless had to endure what you did growing up in Oakland.
Sure. So, to be clear as well, my mother, she had 3 sisters, and so well, there are 16 of us all together, great-grandchildren, and 14 come from Ernest Davidson, who was my mother's father. And so most of them, just about all of them, they lived a different life, and they went straight to college. We have doctors, lawyers, master's degrees, just most of my family. And I kind of looked through everything sort of in a biblical lens, and I believed that there was a purpose for me growing up the way that I did, so that I could see another side, so I could see both sides. And so I grew up near poverty. I raised my son near poverty, and I just believed that, it was divine order. And then by going to Tuskegee and seeing what they did and changing my life, and then coming back and trying to help others rise above. But my mom, she met my dad. He graduated from Texas Southern University in law school, but my dad started drinking, and he said that there was discrimination that he faced in 1938, graduating from law school and not being able to pass the bar. And my mom would joke and say it was because he couldn't pass a bar. But my but they met.
That's funny. Yeah. He could not pass a bar.
which I think they both had some truth to them. And he was a Kappa. He ran a Kappa house. He just and here my mom, tumultuous again. But they met on a ship. My mom came to Los Angeles to christen the Booker T. Washington ship. It was a U.S. Liberty ship, and that's where they met. And I think they thought it was going to go a different way, or at least my mom did, and it didn't. And so that's how I ended up. We ended up in Oakland. My dad became a beer salesman, and he kept drinking only on the weekend, but he drank a lot. And then he ended up moving to Los Angeles when I was little, and I didn't see him again until I was an adult. But I think it served its purpose, and I don't think that I would want to do it over again if I had to, because maybe I wouldn't have experienced the things and been able to see and witness and be a part of.
Well, it certainly, without that experience, it certainly could not have informed your work. This workbook, 16 Success Principles. You certainly couldn't be as as adept as you are talking about these issues had you not lived it. Lived experience.
Exactly.
There's no replacement for lived experience, and so I celebrate that part of your journey. What I really celebrate is that trip to Tuskegee in your 30s got your mind right. You got you on the right track. Let me ask right quick. Let me ask right quick before I move forward. What you make of the impact? You've sort of put your finger on it, but the impact that Booker T. Washington's focus on education has had on your own family. I mean, in fact, that's what turned your life around. But that's a beautiful thing to be a part of a family that has a legacy that values education.
Exactly. And I think that was the one thing I remember my parents agreeing on, that you better get your education. And so even though I was living in the projects in East Oakland, my school was way on the other side of town in North Oakland, I would have to dress my son, and I ended up graduating 6 months ahead of my class, and because of, I think, that one area where my parents agreed that your education is the most important thing that you have, and I kept going. I went the hard way. I ended up, I think when I got my bachelor's degree, I had 2 children, and I was a single mother. So during part of it, I was married during part of it, and then to my daughter's father. But I took the hard way around. Yeah. But education has always been important to me, and I kind of promised my husband that after I got my doctorate that I won't go back to school. But I love school. I love learning.
Yeah, I think a doctorate is enough. I'm glad you made that promise to your husband. Yeah, I think you've done enough at this point.
Good thing I'm afraid of wounds because I go get my medical degree. But go ahead.
No, let me ask what it is about your experience that has made you focus your attention on the needs of others.
Sure. I've always had a passion for my people first. I've always had a passion for helping them to uplift, even before Booker T. Washington. My heart's always ached at some of the things that have happened over the years, or that I've witnessed, or that I've seen. And so any part that I can do to change that, or to contribute to making life better, that's where my purpose lies. And I think it's to encourage individuals or groups of individuals to prepare for the difficulties that they're going to undoubtedly face. We all face in life or in the world, by strengthening heart, mind, body, and spirit.
What have you learned, and what would you share with this audience listening right now about being a slow starter? I believe it's not where you start; it's where you end. And not every one of us comes out the blocks, like Usain Bolt.
Right.
Sometimes we discover it later in life. You didn't get on the right track, as it were, as James Brown might say. You didn't get on the good foot until you were in your 30s. What would you say to folk though who are like you were, slow starters, and it's just taking them a while to find their stride?
Sure, I would just say to never give up. Number one. Never give up, and that there's a quote from my great-grandfather. I'm probably going to bludgeon it, but he said, this is the gist of it. Where you come from doesn't matter as much as what you just said, where you end up. Like, he's not as impressed by where you come. No, your title as he is by what you had to do and go through to receive that title. Yeah. So the depths on which you come. And so I would just say it's never too late. I think about that dash often in between our birth date and our death date, and how short it is. And I think that's really real. Life is so brief. So while you're here, do your part, whatever that part is, to figure out your purpose and make that little dash count.
No, I've heard a couple of great sermons about that it's not when you were born or when you die. It's all about that dash in the middle.
Yeah.
What did you do? What did you do with
that dash? And it goes quick. Yeah, it seems like just yesterday I was saying I went to visit Tuskegee 2 weeks ago, and now it's 30 years ago. So
no,
it's
a beautiful story. How you've turned your life around and went on to get your bachelor's and your master's and your doctorate. Now you're writing books and helping other people. And when we come forward, we'll come right to that. Her workbook curriculum is called 16 Success Principles: Being, Growing, Leading, and Soaring. You're listening to the great-granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, Dr. Sarah Washington O'Neal Rush, right now on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth. Speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
The City of Los Angeles Emergency Renters Assistance Program will start accepting applications at 8 a.m. on September 19th. The program will provide up to 6 months of rental arrears to low-income residential renters who are at risk of homelessness due to unpaid rent as a result of COVID-19 or other financial hardship. Learn more at housing.lacity.org. That's housing.lacity.org.
Extended Family Outreach Ministry presents Praise Fest 2023, Worthy to be Praised Conference and Concert, September 23rd, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center. Morning worship, keynote address, and conference featuring women in creative arts ministry and leadership sharing our stories, His glory, giving all praise, honor, thanksgiving, and glory to God. Don't miss the afternoon Stand Up and Sing Praises concert with the Katinas, gospel singer Babby Mason, Three Daughters, and Kevin Click. That's Praise Fest 2023, Worthy to be Praised Conference and Concert, September 23rd, Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center. For more information and tickets, go to PraiseFest 2023 at Eventbrite.com. Plus, for the next 48 hours, use promo code KBLA48 to get your tickets free. You do not want to miss this day of praise. That's PraiseFest 2023 at Eventbrite.com.
Dominique DePrima, KBLA Talk 1580. Hey, did you know that you can buy a home without making a 20% down payment? That's right. Having a large down payment actually does come with advantages like no mortgage insurance, lower monthly payments, and things like that. But there are lots of different types of loans that could be a fit for your situation. Some of them involve little or no down payment. Whatever your financial goals are, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Initiatives can help support you in reaching them. Access your financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Who do you trust to get at the truth? Tavis Smiley. That's who. The conversation continues right now.
I read a book many years ago, Dr. Rush, called Educating for Character, written by a guy named Thomas Lacona. That book is still in my library. I love what he had to say. And essentially, what he argues for is a values education curriculum in our schools. I don't need to unpack for you or this audience all the challenges that we're facing trying to raise kids with character these days. But perhaps one of the solutions to that, since they spend a significant amount of time of their a portion of their day in classrooms, perhaps the answer in part is a values education curriculum. Before I get into your 16 success principles, your thoughts about whether or not, again, our society and our children in particular would be benefited by a values education curriculum in our schools.
I definitely think that they would, and I would like to say, I wrote the book down because I want to order that book, but if I could just go back a little bit, I wanted to say I started out with a AA degree. Mm-hmm. That was my first degree, and I just want to make sure what you were saying about the slow track, people on the slow track, that they know that there's nothing wrong with the trades and going to trades. Some of the most successful people I know got their vocations from a trade school, or a community college. So I just wanted to put that out there, and
that's consistent with your dad, with your great grandfather's edict as well.
Yeah. Dignity of work, all kinds of work, and to respect people, no matter if they're the janitor or the CEO, and that's what I try to do. And I think my upbringing prepared me for that. But as far as the values, I think that's very important. And I think that our children, I worked for Student Attendance Review Board, and the children, they're being sort of ignored while we fight over everything, the policies and all that. The kids are suffering, and I think if we paid more attention to them in areas where they could grow and strengthen, that would be a wonderful thing.
I'm watching my clock here, and let me just do this. I don't want to ask you a question and have to cut you off, so let me say to you when we come forward, I want to spend our remaining few moments talking about your 16 success principles.
Okay.
Being, growing, leading, and soaring. Our remaining moments with Dr. Sarah Washington O'Neill Rush, the great-granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on!
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when they switched between two turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
When my family does Walt Disney World Resort, we do it big.
Bippity boppity big, like Cinderella Castle.
Uh-huh, big, like those juicy turkey legs from Gaston's Tavern.
It doesn't get any bigger than the Tam Tam Drummers. Get it, Grandma?
Yeah, and big like Goofy's kicks. Yup.
It's your world, so do it big at Walt Disney World Resort.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
All right, Dr. Sarah Washington O'Neill Rush. In these remaining moments, I want to just focus on your work, your workbook specifically, and your curriculum called 16 Success Principles: Being, Growing, Leading, Soaring. Talk to me about it.
Sure. The being, growing, leading, soaring, there are 4 quadrants, and under each is 4 success principles. And these principles, they were born out of my experience of overcoming odds, my training and professional experience in the mental health field, and the insight I gained from the philosophies taught by my great-grandfather in the areas of character building, education, excellence, and leadership. And in some of the material, well, there's exercises, there's activities, and there's information on self-awareness and building self-awareness and self-confidence, including a roadmap for tracing one's genealogy, which I think is important, effective written and verbal communication, critical thinking, including instructions on how to conduct an organized debate, and physical and mental wellness. That's the gist of the book. In the time that we have. And it's with the editor right now, and the name may even change a little bit.
Yeah, now that book comes out later this year. We're just getting teed up on what to expect when it actually drops. I wonder, since you mentioned genealogy, and of course we've been talking in this hour about your own genealogy, and you being in your 30s and learning a great deal more about your great-grandfather, Booker T. Washington, that your mother, who was his granddaughter, didn't want to talk a whole lot about. Let me just ask you a quick question in that regard. Why do you think your mother, Booker T. Washington's granddaughter, why was she so quiet about that legacy, you think?
Yeah. I kind of alluded to it a little bit in the beginning that when she was here in California, because she was born in Tuskegee, and then she came from Washington D.C. to L.A., and then from L.A. to the Bay Area, and again that's when the Black Panthers were coming about. They weren't far. In those days, he was beginning to be thought of as an Uncle Tom. I can remember walking by the TV, and Farrakhan was on, and he said if we would have listened to Booker T instead of calling him an Uncle Tom, we'd probably be a lot further along. And so I took a lot from that. I'm like, thank you. But I think that, and the fact that my dad was so excited about him and they didn't get along about anything, I think that also contributed. And she was modest, and she believed you pick yourself up on your own marriage. You don't lean on someone. She said, I didn't do anything. You know, that was what he did. And she was a very, very, very hard worker. And I think that had, and I wish she'd lived longer so I could talk more to her about this.
Yeah. Since you mentioned genealogy, I have I've never talked to anybody, and I mean not a single person, who has ever done their genealogy search who was in some way not inspired by that search.
Yeah. Even Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah. And you may find stuff in there that is untoward, things that may make you raise an eyebrow or here or there. But writ large, I've never spoken to anybody who did a genealogy search who was not inspired by what they found. And clearly, the more you dug into yours, the more inspired you were. So I hear your point about encouraging people to do these genealogy searches.
That's right. That's right, and that's what, my role in everything that I do is to help strengthen people's minds, bodies, spirits, and hearts. And I think that's an excellent way.
Yeah. What do you, well, I was going to tell a story, but I don't have time to tell the story. Let me just ask you this quickly, though. What do you think? What do you think your great-grandfather would think of you now? All that you've endured, all that you've accomplished, the work that you're doing to inspire and empower others. How might you? What do you hope, at least? What do you think your great grandfather might think of the work and witness that you are presently engaged in?
Well, I was going to say, I hope that he would be proud of me. And I actually, as he did, every time before a speech, he would pray. And I pray. And I even prayed about this interview with you, with Mr. Tavis Smiley, that he would give me some words to say, or at least some support as I come on your show. So I hope that he would be proud of me, and that my mom would be proud of me, and all my ancestors. And yes.
Yeah. And I hope that you are not as shy as your mother was about sharing with your children and grandchildren and offspring. I hope that you're not shy about telling them the Booker T. Washington story.
Right. I'm not at all, and I push them to read Up From Slavery and to read the books and to at least be informed before you make it. Be informed. Don't listen to hand-me-down, this is what happened. You read it for yourself, research it for yourself. And so I think I've done a good job at that.
Well, let me close by saying what a great honor it's been to have you on this program, and let me further say that your great-grandfather came through for you today, because it's been a great conversation. And he gave you what you needed to get through this, and I am humbled. Dr. Sarah Washington O'Neal Rush is the great-granddaughter of Booker T. Washington. If you have never heard or read his renowned Atlanta Compromise speech given on this date, September 18th in 1895, today be a good day to Google it and research it and read it, since this is a historic occasion. So no time like the present to get caught up on this great speech, sometimes referred to as the Atlanta Exposition Speech. Either way, you'll find it online. I encourage you to read this great speech from Booker T. Washington given on this date in 1895. Dr. Rush, thanks for coming on. All the best to you. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
My great honor to have you on the program. When we come forward in our final hour, Cedric the Entertainer, the first of the Kings of Comedy, with a novel. We'll talk about it on Tavis Smiley.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Esther Dillard, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A report on the San Diego County taxpayer-funded immigration program is raising some concerns. The Immigration Rights Legal Defense Program provides legal assistance for immigrants at a cost of $5 million since May 2021. The Board of Supervisors was split on the report, with some saying that the county should be using taxpayer money to tackle the fentanyl and homelessness problem. Meantime, in New York City, Black Mayor Eric Adams continues to call on the federal government to do much more to help the city with the migrant crisis. The mayor spoke out again about the drastic budget cuts needed in order to make way for billions of dollars in spending on the migrant issue. And consumer sentiment is down slightly this month. The University of Michigan's early reading for September notes uncertainty over inflation and the economy. And that's the latest. I'm Esther Dillard from the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
A SIG alert has been issued in Fountain Valley as a stalled garbage truck remains in the right lane of the 405 north before Magnolia Street, while a 25-minute backup runs heavy from Highway 73. In Anaheim Hills on the 91 west before the 55 Costa Mesa Freeway interchange, watch for an accident on the right shoulder with heavy traffic from Ware Canyon Road, Yorba Linda Boulevard interchange. Also expect heavy traffic as you head through Angels Stadium as the Angels are versing the Tigers tonight at 6:38, adding to some heavy delays in this area.
KBLA Talk 1580 is dedicated to empowering our communities by providing progressive talk radio for our audience. We strive to be an intersectional voice for the voiceless. As a Black-owned and operated station, we are committed to highlighting diverse perspectives and creating safe spaces for meaningful dialogue. We believe that everyone has something unique to bring to these political, economic, social, and cultural conversations, and we don't shy away from the hard conversations about current events.